Today, we're getting new and disturbing insights into the mental state of Bryan Kohberger, the PhD criminology student accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students. The New York Times has uncovered online posts from his past that paint a picture of an isolated and depressed teenager. In one post, Kohberger writes, "I can say and do whatever I want with little remorse." And in another, "As I hug my family, I look into their faces. I see nothing. It is like I am looking at a video game." Kohberger is currently being held on 4 counts of first-degree murder and the fatal stabbings of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Zaina Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. Joining us now is CNN chief law enforcement analyst John Miller and retired FBI profiler Kathy Canning Mello. She's also an instructor of criminology at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. Kathy, let me start with you first. How typical is it to learn that a suspected killer viewed their own life as it were a video game without emotion? I mean, when you hear about something like that, some of this starts to make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I find these texts really fascinating, and they give us some really, I think, important insights as to what Bryan Kohberger was feeling during his teen years, where he was experiencing a dark period, right? We have him addicted to heroin at the time. He's talking about suicidal ideation. He's talking about this lack of emotion that certainly we see evidenced at the crime scene.
And John, how do you think all of these details will impact the case as investigators try to determine a motive?
Well, motive has been still the burning question here because there's still no indication that he knew any of the victims, and it is such a personal and hateful crime. And yet, you know, as Kathy could underscore, every offender in the serial killer or mass murderer field is going to be highly individualized. Each one is different. That's a given. And yet there are common traits that run across these offenders. And one of them, and he kind of reads us through this in these emails, is an inability to feel sympathy, no relationship with empathy, an inability to feel guilt or remorse, which of course is the combination, the emotional cocktail that allows them to do the things they do and then to be able to repeat those acts again if they're not stopped.
And John, this detail in the Times that the suspect became fascinated with criminal psychology, said he hoped to provide counseling for high-profile criminals. I mean, that's a wrinkle that you don't see in many of these types of cases. At least that I'm aware of.
Jim,
yeah.
This is highly unusual, but it's also, in this case, there are so many things that really beg to be dug into more. If you look at the posting he did as part of his master's project, asking criminals to come in and be interviewed with him as the coordinator about the psychological traits of decision-making during their crimes. What were you thinking when you did this violent act? How did it make you feel? What was your plan? What, if anything, did you leave behind? On one hand, you could say that was a study, although the structure is very non-academic. On the other hand, you could say that this was, as Mary Ellen O'Toole posited last night, this was an act of voyeurism, meaning these interviews would allow him to immerse himself in feelings that he was having by experiencing them through others.
That is disturbing. And Kathy, the New York Times says that one of Kohberger's friends told them, or told this individual, he suffered from a neurological condition called visual snow, where people see scattered dots like static on a TV. And one of the posts says, and I'm reading here, it is as if the ringing in my ears and the fuzz in my vision is simply all the demons in my head mocking me. It doesn't sound good.
No, it sounds very disturbing, but we're going to have, I think, more deep interviews of people who know Bryan well in order to understand that condition that he had and any impact it might have had on his behavior at the time or later in life. And if the condition still exists, we don't know that. So I think it's going to be incumbent upon prosecutors and investigators, and it's great now that they have a few more months to do this, to conduct these long behaviorally oriented interviews. When I was in the BAU, we had an instrument called the General Assessment Questionnaire that had 100 questions that probed into areas of an individual's life, their personality traits, their hobbies, their attitudes, and it was meaning to get more insight about their behaviors, because we have some, casual contacts that said, he's charming. Well, do we really know he's charming? Does he lack empathy? Is he cunning and manipulative? Is he controlling? Does he harbor misogynistic feelings? All of these things are going to be evident in people that know him well. Certainly, we're getting some indications of his personality through his online persona, but we need to understand him offline as well, because at some point the prosecutor is going to have to paint a picture of this individual to a jury, and they're going to have to make some connections in their head. Is this the kind of person, number one, physically capable, but number two, psychologically, emotionally capable of committing such heinous crimes?
And John Koberger has maintained his innocence through his lawyer. But I mean, given what we've discussed so far, there is a decent amount of evidence that police have, that investigators have in this case, do they not?
That is true. And I mean, we're going by the American standard, which is he is innocent until proven guilty. But when you look at the probable cause document, you can certainly see, based on the evidence that they put forward, why he's charged in this case. And you can certainly see, and this is something that people really haven't focused on, is authorities in Pennsylvania that helped put together the arrest warrant and execute the arrest are now going very carefully backward through Koberger's entire history, from the time those emails were written as an adolescent right up to the time he left to go to the Washington, Idaho area, because there is an overarching theory that a multiple murder of 4 people in the middle of the night is probably not an offender's first act of violence. They're looking at unsolved cases. They're going to use that DNA to compare them to samples they have. They're looking for any stalking behavior. They're really kind of going backwards to say, was there something we missed here?
Right, especially when you go through some of the things that he said about himself. I mean, that is very eye-opening stuff. All right, John Miller, Kathy Canning Mello, thanks for that discussion. Fascinating discussion.